Welcome everyone. This video will be discussing about the types of notices in construction contracts. Even though this is a very large topic and it may take weeks to discuss on the entire types of notices in the construction contract, I have limited the discussion to 20 kinds of notices in two videos for easy understanding for the beginners and maybe also a refresher for the experienced person. What is a notice? A notice is a formal communication between the parties that enters into a construction contract. Let's say it is a construction contract between an employer and contractor. So both the parties have defined roles and obligations under the contract. So each party has to be communicating frequently with the other party so that they both will be in the same mindset of executing the contract. But notices are always seen as an legal communication because they form the most formal kind of notices when issues occur later. So let's go one by one. So the first one is the notice of delay. So 60% of construction disputes arise from delays. So whenever a delay occurs, depending on the party which is making the delay, usually if the contractor makes a delay, the employer will send a notice. And if the employer makes a delay, the contractor will send a notice. But as per contractual obligation, the contractor has to keep on monitoring all the plan and delays happening in the project. So the contractor has to send a notice to the employer whenever a delay occurs. And he should also say that whether this delay has an impact on cost or timeline. Yes, of course, we cannot give an entire delay analysis or extension of time in a single notice, but you can give a glimpse. Yes, this will have or may have an impact on the time and cost, and the detailed reports will be shared later. The next is a notice of defects. These are also very common kind of notices which usually comes from the employer to the contract. During the construction phase, if the employer finds some defects in the workmanship or the drawings or designs, whatever it may be. So they can send a notice of defects to the contractor. The contractor shall respond with what is the remedies or repair activities they are going to take on it and what will be the time impact or cost impact, whether they are going to observe. So that will be the later discussion. Notice of non-payment. So people from construction industries are very well aware of this kind of notices. This always comes from the contractor to the employer because the employer only releases the payment in the construction contract. So if the contractor has completed a job and they have submitted the bill, but they have not received the payment even after the credit period, usually there will be a short credit period or processing period since the submission of the invoice or the bill. So if they are not receiving, yes, there will be a relationship and they understand to some level it goes. But please be very contractually careful in sending these notices once the credit period gets over as per the contract, because this will definitely impact the contractor's cash flow, and if the contractor's cash flow gets impacted, it will impact the project. A notice of change orders. So change orders are not new in construction contracts, and whenever a change order arises, there is a procedure for the change order. The notice has to be given from the contractor to the employer, or from the employer to the contractor. Mostly it will be from the employer to the contractor. But most of the cases, they don't give a notice of change order. The employers will give an oral instruction, or they will give comments in the drawings or documents. So usually the change order comes in a disguise to the contractor. But even though the employer has not declared that as a change order, the contractor has to declare that this is the change order. It will have an impact on the time and the cost of the project. That's very important because all the claims in the later stages will always be calculated from the start of the notice. And there are many standard forms of contracts which have a time bar clauses, and there are many jurisdictions in the world that strictly follow the time bar clauses, and there are jurisdictions in the world which they don't give importance to the time bar. But however, when we have a contract, let's go by the contract and why we should give a chance for the dispute and the discussions on the time bar. Notice of variation. So if there are changes or variations to the specifications or the BOQs or the design, then the contractor has to send a notification when there is a variation to the employer. Or it also comes from the employer to the contractor when there are negative variations or some other variations that the employer needs. So every notice has to come with both the time and cost impact and what will be the duration required for completion of the entire project. Notice of acceleration. Acceleration itself is a very huge concept, and there are different kinds of acceleration, say from directed acceleration, which comes from the employer to the contractor, constructive acceleration when the parties are unsure who made the delay and it has to be accelerated. So that is an acceleration from contractor to the employer. And then mitigations when the contractor himself makes some delays and it has to be mitigated. So that's a different kind of acceleration. And when the acceleration has to be taken seriously when there are delays occurring in the project, and there might be also accelerations required when there is no actual delay. Say the employer might need to complete the project before the agreed timeline so that they can start the operation. So in such cases, it will be directed notice of acceleration. Notice of suspension. In most standard form of contract and also in bespoke contract, only the employer has the rights to notice of suspension, and there are certain procedures has to be followed, and which is the first is the notice, and they have to give a notice, and they have to give time for them for demobilizing if required, and they have to give a certain prolongation cost if the suspension goes beyond a certain day. So there are such classes on this. So this may be due to funding issues, or this may be due to unforeseen circumstance, or it may be due to shutdown. It might be brownfield project, and the employer might be doing a regular shutdown preventive measures. So it happens in that way. The notice of termination. There are different kinds of notice of terminations, like termination due to convenience by the employer, termination due to default of the contractor, termination due to force majeure. In all the three varieties of termination, most contracts will give the contractor the right to terminate only under the force majeure. But it depends. Even there are cases that where the contractor can also terminate due to the default of the client, but those clauses are usually not well written in the standard forms or bespoke contracts in the contract world. Notice of force majeure. As we said that just before, a notice has to be given by the party which is not able to perform its obligation under force majeure. The force majeure is a concept. It's a French word. It denotes the act of God. It's something which is beyond the control of both the parties. The mere occurrence of a force majeure will not affect a party or will not give a leverage to the party to not perform in their obligations as per the contract. The party which has been damaged by the force majeure has to evidently prove that they have been damaged and not been able to perform under the force. Only then they get the coverage under the force majeure. But at any cost, it is good to raise a notice of force majeure, and many contractors will have a second thought in raising a force majeure always, because the force majeure clauses comes with only with extension of time, and party that raises the force majeure will not be eligible for a prolongation cost for the extended time. So it depends. It depends on the scenario and depends on the actual cost. So that's a detailed discussion. But this is the general mindset of the contractors while raising a notice of force majeure. A notice of adverse site condition. So when a contractor goes for starting the construction works and excavation start, or even though without starting the excavation, they find some adverse site conditions which is not fit for the contractors to start the work. There might be different environmental factors or site conditions which were not disclosed at the time of the tender or award. So those notices has to be gone from the contractors to the employer to see how it affects the overall project timeline, whether it may have a cost impact or not. So by this we end the first video of 10 notices. And soon we will see about the next 10 notices. Thanks for watching.